All right. So on this episode of Empowering Her, I have special guest Jana Fryman. Jana, thank you so much for being on here.
Well, thanks for having me, Josh. I'm really excited to talk with you and then through you, your students today.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start off with what's your career? What do you do to make money? And then I think my students always get a kick out of, and I think what's particularly important is we got to hear your story, kind of that path that led you to where you're at now.
Yeah. So currently, I come to you today as the Director of Talent Acquisition and Personnel at the Shift Network, which is a fully online remote company based on more holistic medicines. And so we have a bunch of different online courses and events and an app based on like yoga and qigong and indigenous wisdom and racial healing. And so it really aligns with who I am as a person as well as my personal values, which took me a long time to find. That's where I am right now, but this is not where I started. I started college not having a clue what I wanted to do. A lot of majors, if you decide to go to the college route, don't put you on a pathway to a specific job. It opens doors. It doesn't put you on a narrow path. And so I eventually got to the point where I had to choose a major. They wouldn't let me schedule any other classes unless I had chosen a major. And I chose public relations because when I sat down with my advisor, it was the most classes I had taken. I graduated, all those doors were open. I had a bunch of different avenues I could take, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And my friend had said, hey, there's a position open at the university and you're really good and you're really passionate about this institution. Have you thought about being an admissions recruiter? And so I started as an assistant director of admissions, and I've spent 18 years in higher education in different roles. So I've been in admissions, so I can tell you how to get into college and how to write those essays. But I've also worked with transfer students. I've worked with students who've been in learning communities, which are focused around a specific topic of passion for the student and the university. I ended my career in higher education after almost 18 years as an assistant director of recruitment, selection, and training, which fed straight into this. So over those 18 years and lots of miles, I've lived in Ohio, Maryland, Virginia, Hawaii, and now I'm in California. So there was a lot of moving because in the field of higher education, especially if you're not a faculty member, in order to be able to move up, you also have to be able, in a way, to move on. And so there was a lot of cross-country moves. So if you ever need to know how to pack and move from Hawaii to Ohio, I can let you know how to do that. The post office was my friend, but maybe not anymore. But eventually COVID hit, and it was a COVID-19 layoff at the university I was at. And that was kind of rough. Like, it's hard to go through a layoff. And so that really gave me the opportunity to sit back and say, where do I want to go? What really brings me joy? And I love connecting people with jobs and finding, folks' purpose. And so this role, I started looking in talent acquisition because that was really that connection for me, being able to help people find their purpose and connect them with jobs and passions that it's going to help them thrive as a human. And so I found myself at the Shift Network, which then also brings in those personal values that I hold for that holistic transformation.
Okay.
I do in a lot of places.
No, I love it. And, I love the fact that you had no clue. So I graduated with my bachelor's degree with like 178 credits. My school was kind of like, Josh, you've got to stop.
Yeah, I was there. That was me. I think it was at like 140, and I had a minor. So that's how I kind of like got it.
That's what they just were like, listen, we love that you're here and we love that we're taking your money, but you have to figure out what
it's really time for you.
I was like, I don't want to leave though. This is great.
I didn't leave. I stayed because I got a job there, and then I worked there. I worked at my undergraduate institution for 4 years, and the only reason I left was because I was happy as a clam. Could have stayed there forever at that point in time, young Jana. But my supervisor at the time said, I really want you to become a director. And in order for you to become a director at this institution, you have to have a master's degree. And so that's the only reason I left, was be able to get that mobility to go up. And I went and got a master's degree, and then I never went back. So didn't really necessarily work in their favor.
Did they say what your master's had to be in, or they were just you just have to have a master's degree?
At that institution, you just had to have a master's. And so I went because I was like, I really like this education piece. And the school I was working for only had K through 12 ed or an MBA. And I was like, I don't want the MBA, and I don't want to be in a classroom K-12 teaching. Um, so I left and went to a college that was nearby. I was driving for the first term, an hour and a half each way for a 3-hour course. And I got a degree in higher education and student affairs.
Okay. It's interesting to me the like the love affair that some places have with a piece of paper,
Yes.
and I as an educator, I would never like disparage going and getting a degree if
Mhm.
you wanted to go and get a degree, or if you
Right.
were wanting to pursue a career such as architecture, nursing, something that required you to have that degree.
Yeah.
But through the interviews I've been doing, and like case in point here is they were like, "Oh, just go get a master's degree. It doesn't
Oh,
matter what
just
it
get
is."
one.
And so you're like, "Yeah, but why would I go get that if it's because you could go and get a master's in underwater basket weaving and they'd be
Yep.
like, "Oh, good job," and you're like, this had no bearing on improving me at all. So it kind of blows my mind that there's still those requirements sometimes, and like especially like I'll see in sales and stuff, and they're like, an undergraduate degree, and it's like that's it. You don't like it doesn't matter. Okay, great.
We currently at the Shift Network don't require, unless, I mean, even for, I'm currently working for a C-suite position. So those are like the CEOs, CFOs. And we don't have educational requirements on any of them. Finance is the only caveat, like we would like accounting.
Right,
But beyond that, our marketing folks, we know that you can get skills and experience that's outside of that piece of
right,
paper. And sometimes the folks, and I'll be completely honest, and people have been shocked because I did 18 years in higher education, of that there is experiences that you can get outside of education that can also make you more creative in a way,
yeah,
and outside of the box, because you're not thinking in that linear, "Ooh, I know this theory for this thing, and this is how it's supposed to work," because you don't know the theories, you just know what has worked before. And you
right.
can be, in a way, in times, more creative than the folks who do have that piece of paper.
I agree, and like even for myself, it's like I have a degree in education, and like I stepped into a classroom, and even with my student teaching, and I thought, oh, I've got this. This is going to be so easy. That first year ate me alive, and I was
I'm
like,
sure.
let me turn to page 427 in my textbook and tell me how to do this.
Yeah. No,
um,
it's the same way in higher ed. We have all these theories. We took all these theory classes, and then I actually stood in front of a class to teach a class on transitioning to college and the difference between college and high school. And we were learning together. I'm like, this is my first time teaching y'all. Grace. Let's give each other some grace.
Right. Okay. So let's go through kind of maybe what a week, because I know every day is a little bit different. So
Mhm.
let's talk about some of the activities and objectives that you would complete in the course of maybe a week.
Sweet. So I work with my hiring managers, and so I'm the person who finds the talent and then gets them into, we call it our funnel or our pipeline. That's our candidates. We get them into the candidate pool. So I'm working with the hiring managers to create those job postings. I'm pushing out the job postings. I'm posting it. Meeting with candidates. I love meeting with candidates. I'm also doing reference checks. I also work HR on the side. It's part of my personnel part of my title, where if there's something that happened, if somebody needs to take leave, I can work through them with those processes.
Okay.
um, we're a startup, and so a startup doesn't, there's a lot of times where sometimes I can get frustrated because, like,
Right.
why isn't this policy in writing yet? We've been around for several years, but it's really because we're in that startup mode, and so there's a lot of gaps, and that's exciting for me. I'm not a person who necessarily likes to go in and step into somebody else's legacy. I like to create my own. So the fact that, we don't have a performance management. So if you've ever had a job, like where you've gone in and they've done an evaluation of your performance, we don't have a system for that yet. And so we're implementing that right now. And so that's really big on my plate, but it's those continual conversations, and it's creating those pathways. Working with the CEO a lot to decide what the next hiring batch of folks are,
Mhm.
because we're growing pretty rapidly. And like, Zoom meetings. We're fully remote. So that's exciting for me. I get to work from my house. You are currently in my office with me.
Nice.
And so like, that's really nice. But the difficulty of being fully remote as well as building that team. So we're also, one of my things every week is posting things randomly, like, hey, it's Monday. Like, how was your weekend? What was the favorite thing you ate? Like, trying to build that team. And so that's what my team and I work on, which seems kind of scattered and all over the place. And it kind of is, but I do not do well with jobs that are repetitive. Those are the jobs that burn me out. And I'm like, no, thank you. I will see you never. So,
which is probably why, one of the discussions that I've had with many, is kind of the startup versus kind of corporate, or um, world, and I think that's one area that a lot of people don't even think about,
yeah.
and I didn't, like, somebody, when we were kind of doing an analysis on mine, they're like, well, would you like, corporate, or would you like startup? And I'm like, well, are they different? And they're like, oh yeah. So that's always an interesting one. Like, what's your personality type? And so, the discussion has always been interesting, to where, somebody will say, sometimes it's better to go to a corporate to kind of learn, and then go to a startup. And then others have said, no, it's way better to go to a startup first and then go to a corporate. And I'm like, I guess, it
Which
just
is,
depends on personality.
yeah, I think it depends on the person. So, we've had folks that have been in education for years that have joined us. I was in education, not in classroom, but I was in form of education for years, and I joined. And we have people who've come from corporate, and then we have folks who've owned their own startup, sold it off, and then, they're here with us. The difference for me is that you always hear startups being bought or acquired by other companies. And
Right.
so it's always that, like, I don't feel like I have to look at my back, because our CEO is very transparent with the status of the company and where we are with investing rounds, which I had no clue what an invest around. Like, what is Series A? I can tell you now. But I didn't know what a Series A funding was prior to working here, because those are the levels of the investors and the amount of investment you're getting from outside companies. And you can be acquired by other places, and then that, do I have a job or not? And we've hired folks from companies that have been acquired that didn't necessarily see it coming. It was kind of just a takeover. And then they kept their own HR team, and now I'm here looking for a job. Whereas corporate doesn't necessarily pivot that quickly. Like, you're not going to see an Amazon hypothetically be bought out by somebody else, because they are the big fish, right? But the startups can be the little fish, and a lot of us start out, from what I've seen and experienced, with the goal of being acquired and being able to make that footprint, and then getting the funding, and then possibly being bought out, so you can move on to your next idea. So it's that continual idea generation.
I love that. Yeah, and that was, I'm just finding out about the series myself, so this is very, very interesting. So, there's recruiting is kind of an interesting animal, and do you think recruiting, because I do see there's, I was on LinkedIn the other day, and there seems to be several, quite a few people that want to go into recruiting and can't seem to get their foot in the door. But I've seen 9,000 postings for people needing recruiters. So how would somebody, like, if I have a student watching this, and and they're like, man, I like engaging, connecting with people, I think it would be awesome to, look over resumes and connect people to jobs and things like that. What would be your suggestion for them to kind of get in their foot in the door? What would the entry level look like? How would they get somebody to give them an opportunity?
So I think it's really looking at, there's two different types of recruiting. There's an in-house recruiting. So I only recruit for the Shift Network. I know our product. I'm bought into our product. I am ready to go with whatever you want to talk about Shift Network. But there's also outsourced recruiting. So those are agencies that you work for, where you have a stack of interviews and positions that you're recruiting for. And so for myself, I am paid a salary. I get paid almost 10,000, or not 10,000. Ooh, that would be nice. I get paid almost $100,000 a year. I'm currently making 97, not including bonuses. And I only recruit here. So I know where my people are. I know where they're coming. I know what my weight is. Outsourced recruiting, if we would go with an agency, we pay them a stipend and then whatever they pay their people. But you have a requirement to be meeting quotas and metrics that are higher than mine, according to the Facebook and LinkedIn groups that I'm in.
Yeah.
Somebody literally shared their calendar the other day and was like, I know how longer I can do this. And from like 8 a.m. until their lunch break, and then starting immediately after 15-minute phone calls to source candidates. When sourcing is where you reach out and see if they're even interested. And I'm like, I couldn't do that type of recruiting. I couldn't do an agency where there's metrics. You're still working with hiring managers, but you're not
right
of that team. I wouldn't be able to do that. So I think it's really looking at, which one you would rather be. Do you want to like buy into the company, or are you okay with that variety of today I'm going to be working for an engineering firm, and tomorrow I'm going to be working for a grocery store, and the next day after that I'm going to be working for an like healthcare. I think it's also figuring out what you're good at and what you're interested in, because a lot of recruiters specialize. Mm-hmm. So there are specifically healthcare recruiters. And a lot of recruiters look at the network around you. So it's how are you able to network? So start it now, because the folks you are sitting in classrooms with now are going to grow up in their and be connected in some way, shape, or form to somebody else, and like building those networks so that those recruiters, when you post something on your LinkedIn or on Facebook, the people see it.
Right.
So it's not just about finding that one candidate. It's also about building your network and maintaining those so that you're able to pull. And so some folks do, like I said, healthcare, they'll get a job in healthcare first. They'll get into their area, whether it's like an admin, customer service, they get to know that, what the people need. So then it's easier to speak the language, because there's jargon in every single field that you're going to go into. Yeah. Or you can do what I did. I did higher ed, and I was able to pivot out into something else. And I just knew that making that connection, being able to talk to that connection. But if you are somebody who's like, I don't like talking to people, it's not going to be your gig. I do it all day, every day.
So do you think it's easier to cut your teeth in an agency, or do you think that there are more opportunities where you could go in-house?
I think it probably depends on the location that you're trying to be in. Being in Southern California, there's a lot of opportunity for both, but where y'all are in Oklahoma, I'm not sure if that's really the case, right? Right. So I think it's specific to region, and then even within a region, if you're thinking Western region, like states, and then where you are in a city or not a city. And are you in a desirable location? We are fully remote, so I don't really have trouble recruiting folks right now, but I know that my friends who are doing in-person positions are struggling somewhat because people don't want to go back in the office. They want that flexibility of working from home. Agencies are going to be able to give you probably like a really great experience and foundation. My training was basically, here you go do it. Whereas I know a lot of the agencies put you through like a recruiting like boot camp so that you can learn it. So it's not that, there's probably not a good way, like either way. But you're going to get a little bit of different education, because a lot of those agencies will put you through the boot camps, and some places like my position are like, you've done this before, you know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Go run free.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then what would you say, you've kind of identified what you really, really love about your role, which is kind of like that connecting with people, connecting people with jobs, because that's got to be, when you connect somebody with a job, they are over the moon, and then you are super over the moon about that. Mm-hmm. What area of your job would you say that you like the least?
Ooh. I get really frustrated when like I have a list of positions I'm trying to hire for, and then the hiring manager doesn't respond to me. So the hiring manager is the person who like basically paces me throughout the whole entire process. And I get really frustrated when there's a bottleneck of like, I haven't heard from them. I've given them candidates. The candidates are asking me what their status is. I'm waiting. And so that to me is the most frustrating piece, because I'm trying to keep, you want to keep the candidates happy. You want to keep the hiring. It's remembering that there's grace involved. So being able to step back and say, I haven't heard anything. I'm following up. But after a week or so, I have one hiring manager I haven't heard from in about 3 weeks. And I'm just like, at this point in time, I'm going to release all those candidates because I've done all of this work. I think the other thing, and it's not necessarily the position itself, but working from home, it's really easy to never leave work. If there's
Yeah.
something where I'm totally working on something and I'm in it, my spouse will say, "Hey, are you gonna join the family?" Like, and it's reminding myself that working from home, I have to build in those breaks because in my other positions, I could just walk down the hallway because I had to physically go to work. I
Yeah.
had an office. Whereas here, I will work through lunch. I'm having lunch. I literally just had lunch about an hour ago because I was just in the flow of doing things, and I'm really getting to the point where I need to set reminders to myself of take breaks,
Yeah.
stand up, go outside of this one space in your house, go walk the dogs. So it's not necessarily a complaint. It's like, oh, this is the worst thing ever, but it's just something to think about if you're going to work. Like if you're like, I want to work from home. Of
Right.
how do you do that, and how do you socialize with people? I'm one of those ambiverts where I need time at night to kind of decompress, but I get my energy from people. And so this is great, but you're all the way in another state. Like I need that in-person interaction too. And so it's finding outlets for that. So I actually had a part-time job at one point in time, and my friends thought I was crazy because they're like, you work full-time, you make DC really good money, and yet you have a part-time job. And I'm like, it's not for the side hustle, it's because I want to be able to get out and meet people. And if I'm
Right.
on a schedule somewhere, I know I'm going to show up. Like book clubs sound great, but there's nothing happens if I don't go to the book club. Whereas another position is like,
Yeah.
I have to go. They're relying on me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, I got a couple questions left for you.
Yeah.
Mentorship.
Mm-hmm.
So, how important do you feel mentors are, and kind of what is your definition of mentorship?
Ooh, man, mentorship is really has been vital to me, and I wish I would have started mentoring relationships earlier. um, I am a first generation college student,
Okay.
so going to college I didn't have that support from my family. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was like, I think that was also part of why I didn't choose a major earlier, because I didn't know what I was really supposed to be doing. Nobody in my immediate family, and we were pretty close in Ohio, had been to college. So I had a mentor who was one of my advisors who had led me through that process, and we kept in touch. And then I kind of like, it felt like after that, after I graduated, I didn't need her anymore, so that fizzled. But definitely, like there have been mentors along the time of making sure, like checking in, making sure that we can connect, seeing where I'm at, what am I, that focus on my growth has been really great. And you don't always get that from your supervisor. I've confused supervisors with mentors before, but they're not the same,
Right.
because a mentor for me is somebody who you can go to and is an unbiased opinion and will ask you the hard questions and not just be like, oh yeah, that's great. Whereas that supervisor has that relationship where if you misstep, they will try to help you grow through it, hopefully. But their job is to really make sure you're getting the job done, not necessarily on your personal growth. And I've made that mistake before.
That's a great point. Like that. Yeah, and I've had, I'm kind of in the same boat to where, I've mistaken. This is way earlier in my career. I don't make the same mistake, but thinking that an administrator or a boss, because they are kind of friendly,
Yeah.
that almost like they're a mentor, and you start like asking more of their time. And I had one literally go, Josh, I'm not like your friend or your mentor. I'm your boss. And
Yeah.
it was like my very first like management gig, and so I thought, oh, well,
Yeah.
it's going to be a great mentor, and they were like, no, no. So I'm glad you brought up that point, because I think it is easy to confuse the two. Um,
Mhm.
okay, so last question, and this is always my favorite one. Uh, and your answer doesn't have to be related to career or education; it can be anything you want. But knowing what you know now, what is one piece of advice that you would give to your middle school or high school self?
Wow. That it's okay not to know. I feel like with my upbringing and my family structure, and then just the society I lived in at the time, there was very much of like, you always needed to know what path you were on, and you always needed to know, and you always needed to be perfect. Right. So there was always that, if I didn't get an A on a test, it was like the world was falling down. And I've gotten to a place, and it's taken years, that my best is enough. I don't have to be perfect, and that I don't have to have a plan. I don't always have to know what's going on because I've spent so much of my time trying to, even though, frustrated my parents, didn't have a major. But in the long run, I needed to figure out what was right for me. And that meant that I didn't have a direct linear path. And so it's being able to say that, one, I don't have to be perfect. My best is enough as long as I'm giving my best. And you don't always have to have a path. You would have asked me 5 years ago if I would be standing in California right now as a homeowner. I would say no. With the family, I would say no, but I am, right? So I think even some of the best laid plans, they're not going to come. They didn't come true, and for better because of where I am today. But yeah, those two things. I think you asked for one, I gave you two. So
That's okay. Because I could probably go give me 10 things, and you would probably go, oh, even if I probably could have said, give me 10 things you've learned in the last 10 years. Because so it's amazing, but I love it. Well, Jana, I really, really, really appreciate coming on here. It's been very, very eye-opening, not only for my students, but for the high school students and for myself too. I've learned a ton through this. And so I really, really appreciate your willingness to come on here and kind of, share your wisdom, your knowledge, and your experience.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really hope that you all have a great year and that everything goes well for you all. And you don't have to be perfect. Your best is enough.
I appreciate that. Sometimes I have to remind myself of that too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.